Hi, I'm Greg Dell with attorneys Dell and Schaefer, and today I'm here with attorney Stephen Jessup, and we want to discuss cognitive dysfunction as a main disabling condition or a secondary disabling condition, which we're seeing with all kinds of medical conditions. And I think outside of the obvious one, which is someone that has a traumatic brain injury or they have a tumor which requires some kind of surgery, and then there's residual cognitive deficits as a result of that. What are some of the other areas where you're seeing cognitive dysfunction related to a medical condition?
I think some of the biggest are the neurodegenerative conditions such as Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, but it also runs into the gamuts of severe mental health from post-traumatic stress disorder, severe depression, and even more and more we're seeing with patients with chronic pain who, because of the pain and or the medication, the side effects, it does really inhibit their ability, their cognitive skills. So it kind of runs a whole gamut of possibilities as to a basis for denial or restrictions and limitations.
I think the cognitive dysfunction becomes invasive in almost all of the medical conditions, because even when you just brought up the side effects of the medication, I mean, how many people are on some kind of pain medication or whatever other type of medication they're taking for their condition, and then they say, well, it's making me drowsy. It's affecting my ability to remember things. I'm tired throughout the day. I feel like it's making me sleepy. I'm groggy. And so that is a cognitive dysfunction. The other gamut outside of the side effects of medication is the people who are having trouble multitasking, focusing throughout the day. Again, like we talked about, being tired throughout the day, all of those symptoms that they say, look, there's no way I can handle all of the responsibilities of the workday. But from our purposes, and people call every day with these types of complaints, what is, in your opinion, the number one way to prove to the disability insurance company that you indeed do have this cognitive dysfunction?
Well, one of the biggest things with cognitive dysfunction, it's like pain or like depression, it's very subjective. There's no way to really tell what you're going through without formalized testing. That testing is usually done by way of neuropsychological testing. A lot of people say, oh, it seems too easy, it's like simple games, whatever the case may be, but it's created in such a way that it can apply across all levels of education. But through the way of the testing goes and the evaluations and scores, it really can show where you may have problems, in your executive functioning, your processing speeds, short-term memory and recall, things along those lines. So that's really the marquee test with respect to establishing a cognitive limitation.
So we've worked with neuropsychologists, which is a subspecialty within the field of psychology, all throughout the country. And what you need to realize that if you're having these cognitive deficits is that it could be very, very helpful in your disability claim to get a neuropsychological test done. Now, this test is not one that you have from your primary care doctor or your psychologist where they ask you a few questions, have you count backwards a few times, and it takes 5 or 10 minutes. This is a test that usually takes anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. It's commonly done over a 2-day period, and there's a whole variety of different what are called standardized tests that the neuropsychologist will choose from based upon the type of cognitive deficits that you're having. So unfortunately, what we see a lot is that the insurance company will request these types of tests before the claimant gets to choose their own neuropsychologist. And we often encounter more of the neuropsychological reports coming from a defense hired expert as opposed to a treating doctor expert. So what are we able to do in those situations where we have a claimant who's undergone a neuropsych report requested by the insurance company? What do you usually see as like the number one I guess I would say, argument that the insurance company stands behind when they have a neuropsych do the examination?
I think some of the biggest is going to be the interpretation of the data as it relates to validity testing, whether or not person put forth adequate effort, things along those lines. Because if they can try to find a way to show a person it's not a valid test, then they'll try to take it, oh, they're trying to fake it, or they're malingering, or they're over-exaggerating, and if they're doing that here, they're doing that in other facets. So that's probably the number one worst thing to have to deal with is that portion. But say all the validity tests come back, normal person gave adequate effort, then it's going to be really the interpretation of the raw data to determine if the person's below average, normal, if you will, and then also does the examiner really take into account the premorbid functioning? You know, someone's education, their job experience, things like that. So you could have someone who's very, very intelligent come across against standardized with the average, you know, person and still be above normal, but from their standard where they started, they could have that decline. So it really comes into the art of the interpretation of those test scores.
Right, so you brought that up. So basically we've represented a lot of doctors, attorneys, business owners, professors, high-level managers, and what that's known is those people are required to have high-level executive functioning. And so you may see a person with high-level executive functioning takes the test, and now the results are coming back as average. Well, what were they before when you used the word premorbid? So a person who has high-level executive functioning and now is coming back as average is actually someone who probably has cognitive deficits. And that's one of the downfalls of the neuropsych testing, because you take a test that's been given to 15, 20,000 people. And often you don't know the educational background of these 15, 20,000 people, but in my opinion, they're people who either volunteered for the test or random sampling of people. And more often than not, we know basically from studies we've read that the majority of people who took this test were not high-level functioning people. So right out of the bat, the test results are not being compared to other high-level functioning executives. So if you come back with average test scores, then you probably have a cognitive deficit, because prior to taking that test, your premorbid was probably high-level functioning. So that's a big problem, and that's where we get into arguing with the insurance company on the interpretation of the neuropsychological results to prove cognitive deficits. And like you said, it's subjective. There's no blood test or X-ray or MRI or anything that's going to say, yes, you have cognitive deficit, unless there's a significant finding in your brain, obviously, saying, oh yeah, there's no doubt this person has brain damage, therefore you have these cognitive deficits. So no matter what your medical condition is, if you feel that you're having any kind of cognitive deficits or you've been diagnosed with a cognitive disorder, feel free to give us a call. We'll always offer you a free consultation. We'll discuss all of the pros and cons of your claim with you, and we'll let you know right away whether or not we can assist you.